As the shackles clicked closed, she yelled, "You can't do this to me. I'm the president of this HOA. I have rights." But my son, Officer Luke Harper, stayed strong. His badge sparkled in the morning light as he held her arms behind her back, his cool demeanor unreadable, like he had done 100 times before. Whirling madly, Karen yelled for her husband, neighbors, even the birds in the trees. But no one volunteered to assist. They were simply astonished and stood there. When she called the police on me for merely returning to my own ranch, this was not the intended outcome. You might be asking, how far it progressed? Allow me to rewind us to the start. I go under Linda Harper. Born and bred in Colorado's tranquil countryside, I am a 60-year-old retired elementary school teacher who recently became widowed. God rest his soul. After my husband Tom died, I made the decision to return to Harper Hills Ranch, our ancient family ranch. 3 generations of my family had passed over this territory. My granddad built the first barn. My parents grazed cattle here, and I used these fields to chase butterflies and gather wild berries growing there. I wanted no city life when Tom passed away. The noise, the lonely flat, the sympathy from neighbors all became intolerable. I was in need of room, real spatial. I thus packed, hired a moving truck, and headed back to Harper Hills. Here, though, things became somewhat convoluted. A homeowners association had started to show up while I was abroad. They called some of the neighborhood Maplestone estates elegant, right? They did not, however, have my land. My ranch obviously fell outside their purview. Still, other individuals objected to seeing a ranch house compromise their unspoiled vista. Then here comes Karen. Hello, Karen. The self-appointed Maplestone Estates Queen Bee is Karen Thompson. Driven a white Lexus SUV like it was her royal chariot, mid-50s blonde bob cut, ruled everything. Like the lawn police, she would stroll the area carrying a clipboard and eyeballing every yard. I laughed and told her no. This was my land, and I was moving back in. I was unloading flower pots when she pulled up and said, "Excuse me, ma'am, are you lost?" She blinked, then she continued, "This is part of Maplestone. You need approval from the HOA." I shook my head. "You're welcome to look. My ranch is outside HOA limits. I checked the land survey records personally." She narrowed her eyes. "We'll see about that." And that was only starting point. Karen set herself to run me out. Every day something fresh. A noise complaint since I was using a chainsaw. A health violation since I had hens, chickens on a ranch. Can you imagine it? Even a petition to preserve the aesthetic integrity of the area, which really meant make Linda leave. But I didn't move. I grew up harder than that. Before school, I spent my days breaking horses and carting hay. One woman carrying a notepad and excessive hairspray was not going to intimidate me. Still, things started to get bad. Karen yelled at my fence one morning, claiming that the color of my barn paint was objectionable. Though she said it clashed with the neighborhood palette, the barn was traditional red, the color of every barn ever. I chuckled. She truly became sensitive about that. 1 week later, I woke up to see someone had white spray painted "Go Home" on my garage door. I had no proof, but knew who did it. I bought paint and covered it up myself, instead of losing it, humming old country tunes as I worked. I was not fighting alone here. Often visiting was my son Luke. Before starting the police school, he had grown up on this ranch and was now a tall, quiet county constable sheriff with piercing eyes. He objected to the current situation. Every time he visited, he discovered something fresh. Shattered fence posts, tipped garbage cans, Karen prowling about acting as though she were walking her dog. I shook my head. One evening he asked, "Ma, do you want me to file something? You have a right to live in peace." "Not yet. I want to handle it kindly. But if she crosses the line again." And oh boy, she did. 3 police cruisers drew into my driveway one morning as I was watering my vegetables. Sirens off, but lights were blazing. 4 cops left. "Ma'am," one said, "we got a call about a squatter on this property." I blinked. A squatter. Indeed, ma'am. The caller said an elderly woman was illegally living on HOA land. I chuckled, really. "You're joking." They were not, though. With arms crossed, Karen stood smugly at the end of my driveway, as if she had just taken home a trophy. "I have papers," she cried out. The cops went to me. "Ma'am, do you have proof of ownership?" I nodded and gently walked inside, returning with the deed, original title, and my ID. "She does not reside here and is trespassing." "I am ready." Another SUV drew up quickly while the police examined my paperwork. Luke was the driver. He had to have listened to the dispatch. Rising in, full costume, he fixed Karen in front of him. "What's going on here?" he inquired gently, but with an edge. One cop answered, "Possible trespassing call." Luke looked at me. I gave a little nod. Turning to Karen, he questioned, "Ma'am, did you file this report?" She did not know him in uniform. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Harper, County Sheriff's Department. You're under arrest for harassment, filing a false police report, and criminal trespassing. That woman has been squatting here for weeks. This property belongs to Maplestone Estates, and she refuses to leave," Luke said, pulling out his badge. Karen nodded. He nodded, then, "Wait, what? You're her son, and you just made a huge mistake." She started to scream at that, but one of Karen's pals stepped up clutching a folder, something that made even Luke's face grow hard just as I thought the worst was behind us. "Oh no," he said quietly. I questioned, "What is it?" He walked me over the folder. Inside was a fabricated complaint signed with my signature, one I never produced. Someone had passed it for false authenticity. Person. And next, were they intending to go? "From where are you viewing? Tell me in the comments. And as this is just starting, get ready." Heart thumping. I glanced at the falsified papers while they shook in my hands and tried to make sense. Under my name, there was a whole stack of bogus complaints. Still cuffed, Karen stood there pallid now instead of red. Martha, her acquaintance, a slender woman with silver hair, also seemed startled. "Martha," I said slowly, "where did you get these?" I just helped carry them." Karen said they were real. "I didn't know she faked anything," she said. Luke passed the folder to a policeman. "This just became evidence. We will search the HOA office for more records." Martha added, "She keeps everything in the clubhouse basement, files, records, even surveillance from neighbors' houses. She said it was for security, but we made her sign things we didn't even read." She whispered. Luke took great attention to her. "You're willing to offer a statement?" Martha nodded hurriedly, as though she had just noticed the ship she had entered was rapidly sinking. Karen screamed once again, "This isn't over, Linda. You don't know who you're messing with. I built this community." She was carried into the cruiser. I fixed her dead in the eye. "No, Karen, you poisoned it." The cruiser sped off, leaving astonished neighbors in front of her and a dust trail behind. But reality settled in, and it wasn't over as the engines faded. Not even closely. Later that day, I watched out over the beautiful fields of my ranch while seated on the porch with Luke sipping sweet tea. The afternoon sun spread long shadows over the grass, while the chickens softly clucked. Still, the tranquility felt flimsy. "Do you suppose she'll get off easy?" I questioned. Luke gave his head a shake. "Depends. If we find more forgeries and intimidation tactics, this could be felony territory. But it's not just Karen. If others in the HOA knew and stayed silent." He had no obligation to complete. Then, early the next morning, an unidentified letter showed up in my mailbox. Just a basic white envelope with my name scrawled on the front. No return address. "You should have left when you had the chance. Stay quiet or things will get messy," said the one sheet of paper inside. No signature. Without fingerprints. Just a scare-oriented message targeted for me. I lacked fear. Though I was enraged, I was wise. I carried the letter straight to Luke. He logged it as proof after photographing it. After that, I checked all of my windows and doors twice, put a new camera by the gate, and adopted Duke, a large German shepherd from the shelter. Duke behaved as if he had been on the property always the minute he stepped foot there, and I would shortly learn why as well. 2 nights later, at 1 a.m., Duke paced the porch like he felt danger, going berserk, barking loudly and deeply. As I peeped out the window, my heart surged, and I noticed the shadows. 3 people trying to stay low near my barn. I waited not at all. I dialed 911 first. Then I personally contacted Luke. "They're back," I said in whispers. "There are 3 of them. They seem to be aiming for the barn." "Stay inside," Luke urged right away. "I am approaching. Don't go out alone." Nevertheless, I couldn't just sit still. Taking my torch and Duke's leash, I moved out the rear over the side field. Now Duke was silent, his muscles tight. 2 men in dark hoodies and a lady with a clipboard, exactly like Karen's, were close enough to see. At that, Duke gave forth the biggest snarl I had ever heard. The intruders stopped. One dropped something like a petrol can. "Hi," I exclaimed. "Private property is what this is. I'm dialing the cops." Their distribution resembled that of rats. One hopped the fence, while another stumbled over a garden hose and collapsed. The woman rushed behind the barn into the woods. Duke chased but kept near, barking so loudly it rang down the hills. Moments later, lights on but sirens off as headlights tore up the drive. Luke's cruiser, gun holstered. He leaped out and rushed toward me. "Where'd they go?" he queried. I drew attention to the woods. "They tried to torch the barn," he noted, "and the petrol can still lay in the grass." 2 of the 3 invaders had been apprehended by morning. You know what? One was a nephew of Karen. The other was a builder Karen had engaged to beautify the neighborhood park. Though something told me she would come back, especially considering what we discovered the following day. The woman remained AWOL. Another note came from tucked inside the barn, taped under the ancient saddle rack. "You believe this is about a ranch? We have no desire for your country. We yearn for what was under it." It was then that I recalled something Tom had once told me years ago, about an oil rights survey conducted decades ago. We hardly gave it any thought or followed up. Nonetheless, Karen might have done. Perhaps this explains her great need to get me off of my own land. I turned to Luke, carrying the note. I must have read that note 10 times. "Son, I think this just got bigger than both of us." Not from terror, but from the startling awareness that everything made sense now. My fingers shook. It had nothing to do with poultry or barn colors or conflicting housing designs. They sought something even more grandiose. Luke walked slowly around the barn, looking at every shadow and beam. "You mentioned, Dad, anything about oil rights?" he asked. I nodded softly. "Years ago, I recall one of those land surveyors passing around. He mentioned that oil could be way under the property. Still, your father dismissed it with a shrug, said we lacked need for it." Luke's eyes narrowed as we delighted in our peaceful animals. "Did he sign anything? Any documentation involving transfer of rights?" "No," I responded. "At least not that I ever saw. But Karen's comment indicates someone is knowledgeable. Their homework is done, so they may dig. They want me gone." Luke turned the petrol can over once again with a gloved hand. "If such is the case, this goes beyond mere harassment now. This is arranged. Whomever's behind it knows exactly what they are looking for. This is why we decided to look. Karen's HOA board's records or actions did not inspire confidence. The most were most likely corrected. Original land surveys were absolutely vital." Luke called and arranged a visit to the county archives. I also called in favor of a longtime acquaintance, Ronnie Jenkins, a retired oil prospector who used to live 2 towns over. From their rodeo days, he owed my late spouse a courtesy. Ronnie promised to check by the ranch by doing a fresh soil reading. Sure enough, he delivered major announcements. He responded, pointing to the reading on his seismic scanner. "There's definitely something here. Not a great pocket, but big enough to interest a private buyer, especially if the rest of the land around here has already been touched." I just stood there, gazing at the hills I had grown up on, the same hills Tom and I had made our life on. We never knew all these years. Karen managed to do. Luke cautioned me to be careful as we awaited official land deed verifications. "These folks sought to destroy your barn," he continued. "Next time, it could be worse." I thus stayed indoors most evenings, kept Duke near, and changed all the locks. But I ought to have known they wouldn't stop. Not while oil money was under pressure. It began modestly. One of my hens vanished from sight. My water line then vanished inexplicably overnight. I corrected it. But the generator vanished from under the shed early the next morning. Luke attempted to file reports, but we both understood this was someone engaged in slow game of intimidation. And then the actual bombshell fell. At last the county archives sent the paperwork. Luke opened the envelope deliberately carefully. "Ma, you're not going to believe this." Inside was a copy of my husband's signed mining rights agreement. Nevertheless, the issue is the date. 3 years ago, Tom went dead. I said softly, "This is dated last year." Luke's jaw tightened. Someone had fabricated my late husband's signature in order to attempt to claim rights to the oil under my property. Furthermore, not just that, Maplestone Holdings LLC was the transfer name. My gut collapsed. Not even a legitimate firm anyway. Luke nodded gloomingly. "Still to come, but it's registered under Tyler Brandt, one of Karen's board members." Tyler was the fake smile man who constantly trailed 2 steps behind Karen during HOA meetings. The person who once rushed over my mailbox without apologies. Everything came together perfectly. They were not merely aiming to start me on my land. On paper, they were attempting theft of it, and they might have got away with it if I had packed up and fled when Karen first arrived instead of staying tough. Fire in his eyes, Luke stared at me. "We have enough to pursue after them, but we need one more item." "What's that?" I inquired. Said we set the trap with a confession in mind. I asked Martha, an old friend of Karen, to tea the next day. She was working with Luke previously, but we needed her for the last bit. "Martha," I said softly, "do you know whether Karen ever brought up oil or selling land rights?" Martha looked uneasy. She leaned forward closely after a lengthy drink of tea. "Karen once informed me she would find a way to get you off that land if you moved back. That you were lounging on gold while the rest of us had nothing at all was unfair." She said nothing about Tom specifically. Regarding manufacturing anything, Martha struggled to swallow. She stated, "If you didn't leave willingly, she'd dig up ghosts if she had to." I had no idea what that meant until lately. Luke, listening from inside on a wire recorder, heard every word. It was plenty to keep ahead. But the instant the cops requested a warrant to search Tyler's office and the HOA clubhouse files, they discovered it. The original false notary stamp, even plans of my land marked with drill sites and more names. Karen was not working on her own initiative, for more board members were involved, intending to divide the earnings once they drove me off and turned the land to a private energy business. 3 more arrests came from the sheriff's department by the end of the day, but my phone rang late that evening, even as I believed we were at last reversing the tide. Luke came first. "Ma, you need to keep cool," he said. "What happened?" "The records office has suffered a break-in. Someone tried to burn the original land files." I sat straight up. "Was anything lost?" "Still not yet. They were captured performing the act, but that was not who we anticipated." He hesitated. "It was Martha, the same woman who supported us, the same lady who handed us everything." I found it difficult to breathe. Why would she engage in such behavior? "I'm not sure," Luke answered, "but she is not speaking, and something suggests she was never merely a naive pawn in Karen's game. When Martha first met me, she sent me a lemon meringue pie, slightly burned on top, wrapped in plastic wrap, accompanied by a note saying, 'Welcome home. Hope you enjoy it, honey.' I had no idea then that the woman who made the pie would one day be caught attempting to hide a criminal operation by burning down a building. My ears still rang Luke's phone call. "Martha, not Karen, not Tyler. Martha. She is not speaking." I sat motionless on my living room couch, dogs resting by my feet, moonlight painting the room ghostly blue. She could enter the HOA clubhouse without restriction. Luke went on. "Security video shows her arriving at 3 in the morning. She went past the alert using a key. She knew just which files to target." "Why?" I eventually murmured. "She requested a legal counsel." "But Ma, we just learned something more." Luke groaned. I grabbed the edge of the couch. "Martha owns 3% of Maplestone Holdings LLC. She was definitely in on it. Surely at some point. Her name, however, didn't come up until lately. Hence this is nonsensical. Her inclusion was added to the papers just last month." I back off, attempting to process it. She joined late, maybe. Possibly she became avaricious. Karen might have promised her a percentage if she watched me and remained silent. Martha might have been afraid as well. She said she considered Karen to be hazardous. I replied softly, "What if she skipped reading all she signed? What would happen if she entered too deeply and then sought to hide her tracks?" Still, Luke remarked, "She is engaged." And someone dispatched her to eliminate the last connection connecting my family to the oil rights. The word went over the neighborhood like wildfire. Once followed and feared like some suburban royalty, the HOA was disorganized. Karen still had outstanding charges in holding. Tyler had refused to speak and polished his legal work. Suddenly not available were the other board members. And me. I simply wanted tranquility. Still, peace seemed quite far off. For someone left another note even after all that. This one was taped to Duke's collar. It did not show up in his mailbox. My heart sunk as back off, or the next one won't be a warning. Someone had broken onto my land. Someone close enough to stroke my puppy. It was at that point I broke. There is no waiting anymore. Not more kindness. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table, lighted a candle, and got out every paper, every note, every record we had accumulated. "We're going to court," I said when I phoned Luke. But Luke had one more surprise for me. "Ma, you do not have to sue. The DA is launching a case from their office. All of it is connected. Criminal plot, fraud, attempted arson, false reports. And guess what they discovered? Linked to the LLC offshore. A bank account totaling over $700,000 already shows." My breathing stopped. "They intended to drill in several months," Luke stated. "They first needed all rights, though, which implies they needed you gone." Then Luke nodded. Every HOA board member was under a temporary restraining order that weekend. Tyler, Karen, and the others were not allowed to approach the land or me within 100 feet. Still, I did not have easy sleep, because those who want money desperately do not simply disappear. Then, quite unexpectedly happened. A developer in real estate called me. "Miss Harper," the voice began, "I speak for a group that would want to buy your land. You would be rather highly paid, including mineral rights. We are offering $2.1 million for the entire estate." I blinking. "That is a lot of money," I said cautiously. "We think this is a reasonable offer given future value." Paused. "Who emailed you?" I asked. The line stopped, then started clicking. They put on display. Luke ran the number, a dead-end burner phone. We now knew, though, for sure that someone else was in this. Someone else outside of the HOA. My acquaintance, a prospector, Ronnie, had cautioned me. Vultures abound in areas rich in oil. You say no once, they present more. Say no 2 times, they send the terrifying ones. And then the terrifying ones were here. We needed clout. Luke and I therefore developed a strategy, telling him everything, the forgeries, the bribes, the threats, the offshore accounts. He contacted one of his FBI connections. Like that, a task force was constituted. The case formally crossed county to federal lines. Karen started to crack at that. Years in prison were ahead of her, so she made a deal. She identified all those engaged, Tyler, Martha, even the outside developer attempting to pay me bribes. She acknowledged signing Tom's signature, stalking me, conducting unlawful surveillance, and faking hundreds of HOA reports. But she also turned over a concealed flash drive. When the cops brought it to our house, Luke and I silently gazed at it. "What's on it?" I questioned. The agent had a dark look. "Everything," he said. "Emails, audio recordings, video files, plans to target other elderly landowners in the area using like strategies." Just the first was my ranch. My stomach spun. It went beyond me as well. They had a playbook. Drive people off their land, create paperwork, grab rights, turn around to developers, rinse and repeat. The agent stated they referred to it as Project Clean Sweep. Karen was a recruiter, not only the HOA president. Silent as I sat, I considered all the people who had lived here, the family spanning generations, the widows, the retired veterans. They were aiming at the elderly, the alone, the quiet individuals like me. But this time they chose the incorrect ranch. Because I was not alone myself. I was Luke. I belonged to Duke. And right now I was carrying the truth. The FBI discovered one more, an encrypted email from the developer's laptop, slated to be sent 2 days from now, just as I started to sense the storm building. Phase 2 starts Sunday, it said. Take the ranch regardless of circumstances. All the same, I stood slowly, fixed on the agent. You ought to remain somewhere safe, he advised. I stared out over my house, barn, garden, porch swing. Not at all. I said I'm not running here. The agent let out a sigh. We will then post agents outdoors. You will be under protection all around. Sunday was arriving, though, and someone out there still wanted me gone even with protection. Saturday night, I slept very little. Every squeak in the hardwood flooring, every blast of wind against the windows, every rustle in the trees sensed as a warning. Normally calm and steady, Duke roamed the hall all night, ears tuned and growling low in his chest. Sunday showed up, and I could feel something approaching in my bones. At the end of my driveway sat 2 unidentified FBI trucks, all dressed as ranch employees. Luke had pulled strings to ensure their best operatives were on location, though their eyes never turned away from the road. One held a shovel and the other a feed pail. That morning, Luke advised not to go anyplace alone today and was pacing the porch with a cup of black coffee. They are becoming very desperate. That email was not a bludge. I nodded, arms tightly encircling my chest. What should happen if they arrive without vehicles this time? Suppose they are already hidden out there? Luke did not reply straight away. Then softly, he replied, "We'll be ready." Along the edge of my property, the FBI had installed motion detectors, tripwires buried under grass, a live drone broadcast circling above. Still, by lunch nothing had happened. Not a great sound. Not like a shadow. Maybe, just maybe, part of me felt they had backed off. But I observed something unusual about 3:47 p.m. Not only poor reception, 0 bars, no data, no Wi-Fi. My cell phone had no signal. I went outside. "Luke," I answered. "My phone's dead." She checked his. Not anything. The agents followed the same path. Every gadget got caught. The drone feed cutout starts at this point. We all stopped. Radio. One of the agents stated examine the comms. The portable buzzed before statically screaming. Luke turned his attention toward the hills behind the barn. They are packing us full of jam. The taller agent cursed and said, "They're coming. Get her under here. Lock the doors." But I missed the door since that's when we heard it. A low rumble, first faint then stronger, like tires rolling quickly over ground. 3 black SUVs flew over the hill, creating dust clouds and traveling quickly. Too quickly. One agent screamed, "Positions! Guard the perimeter." Luke called me behind the porch pillar by grabbing my arm. "Stay down." The SUVs came to a stop with cries. Doors swung open. 6 men sprang out dressed in dark tactical gear. There were no emblems or names. They had masks on their faces. One yelled, "Linda Harper, come out now," from something that resembled a megaphone. "You have 5 minutes to sign over the mining rights, or we take what we need." My heart thumped. Duke started barking furiously next to me. Luke spoke calmly but with lethal force. With his fingers, he indicated, "They don't know we're not alone." The FBI officers moved immediately from behind haystacks, from barn rafters, even from the silo. They had been stashed all about. One yelled, "FBI! Drop your weapons and turn on yourself." The disguised men did not give up, though. Rather, they started firing. As bullets tore past the porch post, I yelled. From the railing, splinters burst out. Duke surged forward, barking crazily. Then Luke drew him back. Gunfire illuminated the afternoon, but the agents persisted. It was anarchy, dirt flying, glass breaking, yelling from all about. One of the masked men sprinting toward the barn with a rucksack strapped to his chest caught my last view before I landed. Something seemed off. That did not constitute a weapon. It turned out to be a detonator. "Luke," I cried out. He was, however, already on motion, avoiding gunfire. He dashed across the field, tackling the man only feet before the entrance to the barn. As they landed, a great thud reverberated over the property. The man's hand missed the detonator. Taking it, one of the agents said, "It's live." "Running a timer." "Defuse it," says Luke pinned the culprit and yelled. Beside him, another agent dropped in and started furiously working on the gadget. I stood still, seeing everything happen like a dream inside a dream. The ranch changed from battlefield to arrest scene in a few seconds. There were 3 down among the disguised men. 2 had fled only to be pursued and apprehended by backup agents, at last clearing the comms congestion. The man with the detonator was last one. He was cuffed and disarmed. It was ended, or so I reasoned. At last the FBI bomb specialist turned off the gadget. It had been scheduled to knock the barn to bits. Inside the rucksack was a contract signed with my fake signature, which would find expression in the barn remnants. Their entire scheme was to pretend my body was missing, then accuse me of having signed away the mineral rights before vanishing. Stunned, I sat on the porch steps, shivering as the agent locked the last of the firearms. One of them strolled up and remarked gently, "Ma'am, you're lucky if we hadn't been ready." Still, I was not considering that. I found myself wondering why me? Here's why. Why does this ranch appeal to you? Luke came up at that point, face grimy, clothes ripped from the fight. He continued, "Ma, it wasn't just oil." I blushed. "What do you mean?" He held up a black USB disk taken from within the detonator pack. "Encrypted. We are forwarding it to HQ," he said. "But the first scan shows documents, maps, a list of property owners across 3 states, and every single one is an elderly widow living on land with possible underground resources." I mumbled my mouth. Not only was my ranch unique, that was a system, an idea. On their list, I should have been the first name, and the first to vanish. I peered across the horizon at my land, the old gate of my father, the hill Tom used to sit and sip his coffee on. I was still on my feet, but right now I had to make decisions. Should I hang on to the ranch? Walk away and sell it? Do I fight for the others with this? Luke bent next to me before I could talk. "We are not yet done," he stated. "Not even close, since the FBI discovered another name after opening the USB that night. One I had not heard previously. Funding it all is someone else. Behind the money, the threats, the LLCs is the one. Someone with strength, and someone else still free." I cried when Luke handed me the file. Someone I knew. I watched the name on the screen. Not possible. My hands went frigid. My mouth opened, but no words flowed. Whispering, "No, that has to be a mistake." Still, Luke did not turn away. "Ma, it's real. 2 times we ran the name. From him, the funding, the company layout, the jamming devices, even the cloaked personnel all have origins." The name shining on the laptop screen was Daniel Westmore, the godfather of my kid Daniel, best friend of my late husband, our best man at the wedding. Sunday dinners had been shared by us. He used to send his wife to assist in the garden. We had shed tears together at Tom's funeral. I said farewell to the man I loved more than life, and he held my hand. And all through, he had been conspiring behind my back. Not clear to me. Why? I asked. He understood this ground meant everything to us. He assisted Tom in construction of that barn. He handed Luke his original fishing pole. Luke's jaw closed tightly. He also started Westmore Holdings, the actual business behind Maplestone Estates. The LLC was really only a facade. He began it 6 months after Dad died, just long enough for you to be vulnerable. Blinking through tears, I slid back into the rocking chair on the porch. Daniel told me to think about downsizing. Daniel offered to handle the paperwork when I returned. Daniel cautioned me these HOA types were serious. Maybe it was not worth the aggravation. Linda, all of it was according to his strategy. I responded sharply. He never wanted to help me. He was attempting to get me to quit. Luke nodded. He's behind it all, Karen, Tyler, the forgeries, even Martha's late participation. He watched everything play out from behind his bankroll. Again, my heart broke all over. Daniel had been standing next to my man as he went. In his last hours, he grasped my husband's hand. Then he turned around and sought to destroy everything we created. The FBI agent went out onto the porch. "Ma'am, although Westmore is already on the road, we have enough to issue a federal warrant. What do you mean? This morning, he reserved a ticket out of Denver. Private jet under registration with a sham company. He is hurrying. Luke got on his feet quickly. We then follow him. Breath short then, but how? I asked. If he is in the air, the agent broke off. We have already informed the FAA. His plane cannot land without direction. But he's smart. He owns people as well as money. He might pass right under here. I got to stand at that. No, I responded with great conviction. She won't. Not on this occasion. Luke arched eyebrows and glanced at me. I know where he is headed. I said. His running is not motivated by fear. Desperate is why it is happening. He is going to try to wipe off the remaining proof. He mentioned a property he maintained in the Rockies, a remote lodge devoid of mobile towers, no neighbors, etc. He is probably headed in that direction. Luke spoke on the call. The FBI turned a squad toward the mountains in a few minutes. Though they wouldn't let me, I wanted to leave, said it was too hazardous. I thus waited nervously hour after hour, sitting silently, the sun setting behind the hills. I held a picture of Tom and Daniel from 1982. Back then, not men with secrets, but rather lads with hopes. Luke then eventually gave a call. She is under custody. I let out a puff. They grabbed him attempting to burn the hard drives. He had evidence piled high, a fire pit set up, and a generator running. Though he was ready to demolish everything, they arrived on schedule. Did he speak? Asked Luke stammered. He claimed it was not personal. I started to chuckle, choked back. Not personal. He aimed at ruining all I owned. I know, Ma. But it's done. Except that was not the case. For they discovered in Daniel's cabin more than just hard drives. They discovered maps, redline surveys of 9 other properties in surrounding counties, all owned by elderly widows, all sitting on possibly valuable land in addition to my ranch. They were not simply here for me. One by one, they were acquiring territory before the state could control the mining rights, therefore creating a network, a peaceful kingdom based on documentation and terror. Luke said they were going to expand. Statewide, possibly all around the area. If you hadn't stood your ground, I nodded slowly, it wouldn't have stopped at all. The headlines of the following week cover every major outlet. Colorado widow foils multi-million-dollar land theft scheme. FBI finds HOA-based mineral fraud ring. Ranch heroine exposes dishonest developer network. News stations, lawyers, even families of the other widows congratulating me for keeping the queue under control came in. I felt not like a hero. I was fatigued yet still alive. All whole. Safe. I stood out that weekend at the fence post Tom used to sit on. The sun ascended softly across the plains. Duke sat at my feet, wagging his tail. Softly singing in the distance were birds. Hands in his pockets, Luke joined me. You did it. I let out a smile. We did. We silently stood for a long time. Then Luke remarked, the DA's sacrifice of atonement. You might grab the money and relocate to a more convenient location. I gazed out at my house, barn garden. No, I remarked. This is my house. The sweat of my grandfather, the hands of my husband, and now truth have already paid for this land. Luke grinned. You would say that, I said. But a pickup truck rolled gently up the driveway as we turned to head back inside. One strange man emerged carrying a briefcase. He seemed tense. Mrs. Harper? Nodded. I work for the State Land Review Commission. We were asked to contact anonymously. We may have discovered something else under your land, not oil. Something more broadly. Luke moved forward with narrowed eyes. What does you mean? The man turned over a geological report. Luke froze when he opened it. I gasped as I read over his shoulder mop. It was more than simply grease. Lee-based it was. One word set my heart pounding once more. Standing there uncomfortably, with his suitcase like a shield. The state official someone anonymously raised alerts for us. We tested from the same seismic scans your prospectors sent previously. Under your western ridge, there are indications, strong ones, of lithium concentrations. Luke turned the pages of the report, concentrating on it. Are you quite sure? The man nodded slowly. As confident as we can be without drilling. But should the samples be accurate, ma'am, This is not merely any remote mineral site. It falls into a strategic resource zone. I started to lose my voice. Strategic. He turned to stare at the horizon first, then at me. Lithium finds application in batteries, phones, electric automobiles, even military technology. Millions could be worth your land. Perhaps tens of millions of people, and if the U.S. labels this as a national interest site. Luke stopped. It will draw more than just selfish developers and HOA bullies. The man avoided conflict. I dropped into the porch rocker, Duke sensing my discomfort by putting his weight against my leg. It was about to start all over again, just as I had discovered peace, and as I believed the war to be over. But this time Karen would not be carrying a clipbook. Men in suits, lawyers, government agents, businesses brandishing million-dollar checks would all be present. The man left me with a warning. Expected a formal survey crew next week, along with a card. I would suggest assembling a legal team. Quietly leaning on the porch rail was Luke. What now? At last I saw it. He ran his jaw over it. Should this be true, you will need more than simply legal assistance. You'll need preparation and defense. Should it become federal land, they can attempt to grab it using eminent domain. I gave my head a shake. This country is not for sale. Not right now. Never ever. Luke was sitting next to me. Then we hold the cue once again. But we are smarter this time. Based on their findings, the FBI assisted in accelerating land protections. My ranch was under temporary protection while forensic experts searched the USB drives from Daniel's cache. Over 40 aliases, 18 bogus LLCs, and more than $9.2 million in illicit transfers defined the scope of the fraud, larger than anyone could have guessed. More snakes, though, were crawling from the grass, even with Karen and Daniel inside bars. Not from a developer, but from a U.S. government official in a pressed gray suit, shined shoes, and that stiff smile that never quite hits the eyes. A week later, I received a visit. Mrs. Harper, he continued coolly, I am here on behalf of the Department of Energy. We would want to suggest a cooperation. You retain the ground. We rent the rights. I not even blinked. He laughed like if it were a joke. We are discussing national advancement here. Pure energy. Patriotism. I stood slowly staring at him dead in the eye. You speak of my land here. The farm owned by my husband, the territory owned by my family. He produced a folder. Please do not make this challenging. Luke emerged from the house in full constable costume before I could respond. You have to go, he stated coldly. Right now. The agent struggled to ground herself, but Luke's presence was sufficient. Tires on gravel crunch as he left the folder behind and headed off. The contract inside the folder totaled $28 million. But what they wanted in return, complete access, unlimited rights, and quiet. I watched the field where we used to see the sunset from Tom's old rocking chair on the rear porch that evening. All this mess, all this agony, because of anything under my land. They did not, however, grasp. It was not the oil. It had not been the lithium. It had to be the memories, histories, the sweatshirt, their prayers, the affectionate nature. This ranch had all on its ground, and money could not buy that. That evening I did not fall asleep. I wrote hundreds of letters to the state, the governor, my neighbors, other landowners who might be successors. I spoke to them straightforwardly, the entire truth. Not only what happened to me, but also almost what happened to every one of us. A petition asking the state acknowledge tiny ranches as legacy land started to gather hundreds of signatures within a few days. Not for selling, not for rent, shielded by legislation. The media caught on. Likewise did other widows, farmers, veterans, people who had been silent for far too long. Originally, they referred to it as the Ranchers' Rebellion. And me also. I started to be its face. I had to. Not because I wanted to. Daniel got a 22-year federal prison sentence at the end of the month. Karen earned 7. Martha testified and went into witness protection. Westmore Holdings went out of business. The shell businesses were taken over. And the state approved the Harper Land Protection Act, a measure barring mineral seizures without unanimous agreement among the residents of a designated community. That day I stood at the Capitol. Day was now gone. Grasping a picture of Tom, I grinned through tears when the cameras flashed. "What are you going to do now, Mrs. Harper?" a reporter asked. I grinned. "I'm heading back home." Once more on my porch swing, returning to Duke, turning back now to my chickens, returning to my tranquility, and I at last let the wind carry away the weight of everything we had survived as I rocked in the golden glow of another Colorado sunset, since they aimed to take my house at last. I did not, however, merely rebel. I will win. From what location are you viewing? Drop it in the comments if you have ever stayed your ground for anything that counts. This narrative proves even the silent ones can roar.